Tonight's story is about losing. It's about Donald Trump losing in court in front of juries of his peers and judges who are fair-minded, losing so much that he starts new battles and fights that will lead to more losing. This is very much a story about what a loser does. I don't mean that in the pejorative sense of the insult term. I mean, in court, there are winners and losers. In fact, it's an area where Donald Trump and his administration lately have had trouble precisely because you can't just lie your way out of it. You can delay sometimes, but eventually you get to the point that there's a winner and a loser. And Donald Trump was the loser of a very serious case, civil, not criminal, about his past alleged conduct. And our top story tonight is about how he, years later, continues to respond to being the loser in court in that case. So this is important, and in some ways it's disturbing because it involves using, and according to many critics and legal observers, abusing the levers of power. But I don't want you, before I get into it, to lose sight of the fact that the system was working, that he was losing, and that a lot of the evidence we have tonight suggests he will be losing again. That is the context for a revenge campaign going to a new low, even according to many people who might sympathize with parts of Donald Trump's agenda. Because his DOJ, now led by an acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, who is embattled in all sorts of scandals and credibility crises, and we'll get to that, has reportedly opened a criminal investigation that relates to E. Jean Carroll, who was the winner of a very prominent case where Donald Trump was the loser in civil court. Carroll had accused Trump of sexual abuse. And in a case that had many twists and turns, she was the winner. Now we are learning at this late hour that the DOJ has done something it didn't do at the time and it didn't do right after, which I mentioned because it adds the suspicion that this is not on the level, that this is yet another baseless revenge prosecution. But they are probing a group that helped fund Carroll's legal bills. It included people like Reid Hoffman, who's a tech billionaire associated with Democrats who's criticized Donald Trump. And the Post reporting, and MS Now also matching the reporting, that the investigation looks at whether the money trail somehow opens them up for an investigation. And then it will also try to drag in statements that Carroll made during a related deposition. And that they view that as perhaps a way to cook up something that Carroll has never been credibly accused of before. And remember, there's been other investigations, other government oversight. Obviously, a person could win a case against Trump but have other legal liabilities. But in her long and storied life and career, that might have come out by now. But instead, we're learning that this is the new chance by this DOJ to try to see if they can allegedly cook up some sort of perjury trap or probe or backward-looking effort against Carroll herself. If that sounds familiar, they tried and failed. They lost an effort to do that to James Comey. The Times reports the Justice Department has opened a criminal investigation to E. Jean Carroll, citing two sources. Now that, of course, as I'm emphasizing, is different than the other report I just put on the screen because one involves that money trail or perjury. This would involve just an open criminal probe into her. The Times notes the DOJ would also look at perjury in this open criminal probe. Now, some of this is familiar because Trump's lawyers had previously made this kind of objection. And I want to be clear, in a civil case, of course there's debates over accuracy. Trump's lawyers in a civil context had every right to raise it. Indeed, it's already been discussed in that case. They said that it was basically misleading if she was concealing Hoffman's financial support, the billionaire I mentioned. Now, that's important because the issue was litigated in court. And an appeals court reviewed that and found, quote, no evidence to suggest Carroll was personally involved in securing the funding. And thus, the court in 24 said we perceive no abuse of discretion here. So this has been exhaustively reviewed by independent federal courts. That cuts against the effort by DOJ to now say they found some new crime potentially. A New York jury in 2023 found Trump liable for a lot of money. As you see, he was initially ordered to pay $5 and then more than $5 million, tens of millions of dollars in this case. That second higher number related to alleged defamation. And again, she won, Trump lost. He was the loser of that case. So that is the baseline here. Donald Trump is not immune from being held accountable in civil court. And even though as president, the Supreme Court has fortified his protections with a kind of legal shield that no other president had received, and that's been well debated, When I mentioned that the process has worked up to this point, while Trump has not paid Carroll, and that is a tactic he has used repeatedly and taken it all the way to the Supreme Court, he was held publicly accountable to a degree that obviously bothered him when you look at his responses. Now, this is part of, as I've told you, a wider set of facts that can only be understood in totality. Donald Trump's DOJ pursuing losing baseless retribution cases. They have targeted very clearly anyone who disagrees with Trump. And so we're updating this chart as we go. You can see on the left, many of these cases that they tried to pursue couldn't even get through the grand jury stage. The no charges stamp you see on the left, others dismissed or dropped. And then other cases, as you see on the right, are grinding on. Tonight, we have this report that perhaps they're looking into the money trail or the organization linked to Carroll. She has, unlike the people on your screen, not, of course, been indicted or anything yet. MS Now also asked E. Jean Carroll and her attorney for any reaction. At this hour, they're not commenting, which is understandable. This is all new information. And the Post reported that a representative for the billionaire I mentioned, Reid Hoffman, and the DOJ are not commenting tonight either. You take this together and you look at the wider pattern, and it tells you two things at once. That on the one hand, the system has continued to work. That's why Trump was the loser of that case. That's why he obviously maintains anger about losing in public on this. And that the efforts to abuse government power to go after these people, while costly, possibly unconstitutional, and maybe there'll be later sanctions for it, those efforts are not working. In other words, that part of the guardrail is holding. I'm not reporting to you that, there's 20 plus retribution cases and they're 5 and 15 or 2 and 17 or whatever. No, it's 0 and 20 plus. They have not won a single case yet. That's just the facts. Does that mean this is okay and all good? No. We are witnessing a rolling retribution campaign funded by your tax dollars, distracting from other more reputable cases and crime fighting to go after anyone who has dared publicly held Donald Trump accountable. And if they turned him into the loser in court, well, apparently all the worse for them, because they now have to costly wage this battle over time against this reckless runaway DOJ. Okay, that's the baseline facts. I want to bring in guests we booked explicitly for this news, which of course is brand new. Former White House Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Matthews, who served in the first Trump administration, was aligned with some of those policy views, but broke over exactly the type of lawlessness that we're reporting tonight. And Nancy Erica Smith, a renowned civil rights attorney who's represented victims of sexual harassment. Nancy, I'm very curious to hear your view. I emphasize the facts here for viewers that this is not a story of everything gone wrong. I think it's a mixed bag for the reasons I mentioned, even though right now we're seeing what looks like the most powerful person in the country getting his DOJ to at least intimidate or go after, and possibly worse, someone who was vindicated in the civil courts. Can you speak to us on both sides of this, why it's not worthless for someone like Ms. Carroll to exercise her rights, and then what else is happening?
Well, vindictive prosecutions are very scary for all of us. If the DOJ, which is supposed to work for citizens, actually is Donald Trump's arm of retribution, that's scary for all of us, because even though he hasn't been succeeding to date, dragging people like Comey through multiple indictments, this costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend yourself against the DOJ. The DOJ still has unbelievable resources, even though apparently they're a bunch of clowns running it right now. I mean, they're repeatedly chastised by the courts, which is the good. You want to also focus on that the guardrails currently are still standing. It's very scary to have a DOJ. Look at what just happened to Kilmore Abrego Garcia. The court found that that was a prosecution that was deliberately vindictive. And that's not a powerful person. That's not Comey or Jerome Powell or John Brennan or Letitia James. I mean, if the DOJ can target whoever Trump wants, and Blanche, his former private lawyer who defended him against E. Jean Carroll, is going to use the DOJ in this way. And it's interesting. I read recently that there was a study by German politicians about how the Nazis were able to use mid-level sort of losers, people who were not good at what they were doing. not the experts. And we have seen this right now in our whole government, and specifically in the DOJ. We have Lindsay Halligan, an insurance lawyer. After an unethical U.S. attorney refused, she went to court and got an indictment, violated all kinds of rules, misrepresented the law, thrown out. Now we have Andrew Boutrous, who apparently in Illinois is running this investigation. He removed grand jurors who voted against a prior indictment against Democratic protesters. And he coached grand jurors, and then he redacted the transcripts. And the federal judge said in that case, I thought the redactions were bad, but when I read the whole transcript, I've seen thousands of transcripts. I've never seen this kind of prosecutorial behavior. In New Jersey, Alina Habba was thrown out by the courts. She threatened to turn Jersey red and indicted both a sitting congresswoman and the mayor of Newark, which was thrown out against the mayor of Newark. She has ethics charges pending against her. Todd Blanche has ethics charges pending. This is scary. It's holding so far, but these people are suffering.
But it was.
I mean, James.
But
yeah.
Carol was right. She was right to step up. There were threats back then. You still think she did the right thing?
Oh my! E. Jean Carroll is my hero. She's so much braver than so many powerful people right now in this country. She did the right thing. We all have to do the right thing. We have no choice, or else we're just going to be living under fascism.